I'm going to share results from the LegacyNet project. LegacyNet is a large-scale study on productive grasslands, which are grasslands used, for example, for forage or as a lane of crop rotation. We were particularly interested in multi-species mixtures, by which we mean combining 2 grass, 2 legume, and 2 herb forage species at sowing. In LegacyNet, the same experiment was conducted at 26 different sites across multiple continents. The first major results from LegacyNet are published in the leading journal Science. The key results from this paper are, first of all, we showed that multi-species mixtures outperformed a single grass that had been treated with more than double the nitrogen fertilizer application. Secondly, we showed that multi-species mixtures outperformed a 2-species grass-legume combination that had been managed at the same nitrogen fertilizer rate. And we also showed that multi-species mixtures are a promising climate adaptation solution. We showed that the benefits of multi-species mixtures actually increased under warmer temperatures. I'm Caroline Brophy, Professor in Statistics at Trinity College Dublin, and I'm delighted to share the details of our LegacyNet work that has been published in Science. The title of our paper is Multi-Species Grasslands Produce More Yield from Lower Nitrogen Inputs Across a Climatic Gradient. This is a collaboration with many scientists with varying expertise from institutions across many different countries. The LegacyNet experiment was conducted at 26 sites, and these sites span 15 countries across multiple continents. The same experiment was conducted at each site, where we manipulated the species diversity of up to 6 forage species. The species used varied across the sites, but an example of a set of species is perennial ryegrass and timothy, the grasses, red clover and white clover, the legumes, and chicory and plantain, the herbs. At each site, we had 47 plots that included monocultures of each of the 6 species and mixtures ranging from 2 species up to 6 species. These plots were all managed at a moderate level of nitrogen fertilizer, which on average across the sites was 109 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. We also had 5 additional reference plots where a single grass species was sown, and they were managed at more than double the nitrogen fertilizer rate. So on average across sites, this higher nitrogen rate was 261 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. We measured the yield at each plot across all of these sites at multiple harvests that spanned multiple growing seasons. What did we want to find out? Essentially, we wanted to know, can we improve the sustainability of productive grasslands while maintaining or improving agronomic performance? A traditionally used farming practice has been to sow a single grass species and manage it with high inputs of synthetic fertilizer. And while this is great for making the grass grow, there are environmental issues with using high inputs of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, right from the manufacture of synthetic fertilizer, and then once it's been applied to a grassland, you can have emissions straight away and you can have leaching into the groundwater. Previous research has shown the benefits of bringing legumes into a grassland because, of course, legumes can fix atmospheric nitrogen in a natural process. An emerging practice in farming has been to sow a 70-30 grass-legume combination. With species-wise, this is typically a 70% perennial ryegrass and a 30% white clover. But what about multi-species mixtures? How did they compare to these conventional practices? And if they have potential, in what proportions should you sow grasses, legumes, and herbs? To address these questions, we modelled our data from across the LegacyNet experiment using the diversity interactions modelling approach, and we specifically modelled the yield, which was measured in tonnes per hectare per growing season. On average across sites, we found that multi-species mixtures yielded 12.3 tonnes per hectare per growing season, while one grass species with higher nitrogen fertilizer yielded 11.1 tonnes per hectare. So with multi-species mixtures managed at a lower nitrogen rate, we still found an 11% increase in yield. This is a key result for improving the sustainability of productive grasslands. We can get more yield with less nitrogen. You might ask if the same benefits can be achieved if just one grass and one legume species was sown instead of a 6-species multi-species mixture. Our predicted yield for one grass and one legume sown in a 70-30 ratio was 10.4 tonnes per hectare. So this means that going from one grass and one legume to a 6-species multi-species mixture gave an 18% increase in yield. So for the same input of nitrogen fertilizer, we can do better with a 6-species multi-species mixture compared to a 70% Lolium perenne and 30% Trifolium repens combination. We have conclusively shown that you can do better with a 6-species multi-species mixture compared to one grass at high nitrogen and compared to a 70-30 one grass, one legume combination. But in what proportions should we sow the 6 species? This is a ternary diagram showing the predicted yield as the sown proportion of grasses, legumes, and herbs is varied. And grasses, legumes, and herbs here are represented by the G, the L, and the H. At any point in this ternary diagram, the 2 species within those groups, within grass, legume, and herb, the 2 species within group are split in equal proportion. So for example, at the vertex marked G for grass, this is the predicted yield for a 50-50 combination of the 2 grass species. And the closer a point is in the ternary diagram to that grass vertex, the higher the sown proportion of grass. And meaning, of course, as you move further away from that point, the sown proportion of grass is reducing. The pink point in the middle there is showing the predicted yield of the 6-species multi-species mixture where all species are sown in the same proportion. And the cyan point is showing the point at which we got the highest predicted yield. Predicted yield of our high-end grass monoculture, that was 11.1 tonnes per hectare. But when does a multi-species mixture do better? We're going to ask the question, what proportions of grasses, legumes, and herbs will lead to an outperformance, a higher performance compared to the high-end grass monoculture? So the second diagram on the right-hand side is comparing each point in the predicted yield ternary diagram to that high-end grass monoculture. So anywhere where you can see a blue region, this is a region where the multi-species mixture is outperforming the high-end grass, and the lighter grey regions are where the multi-species mixture is comparable to the high-end grass monoculture. So this means that you can change the proportions of grasses, legumes, and herbs and still do better or comparably to the high-end grass monoculture. Benefits of multi-species mixtures, therefore, were quite robust to changing the proportions of sown grasses, legumes, and herbs. I'm going to ask the same question for the comparison to the one grass and one legume combination. So the predicted yield for the ryegrass and white clover combination was 10.4 tonnes per hectare. And the result was quite similar. We found quite a wide range of sown proportions of grasses, legumes, and herbs that outperformed this 70-30 grass legume combination. Essentially, there was quite a wide region of sown proportions of grasses, legumes, and herbs that will perform better than these conventional practices. The shaded region here highlights a wide gradient of sown proportions where the yield remained high. The 6-species multi-species mixture with all 6 species equally sown is inside this region, but yields will remain high if, for example, more legume is sown or if the ratio of grass to herb is changed. So this means that there is some flexibility in the sown proportions that can achieve high yields. So far, we've looked at what happens on average across sites. Now let's take a look at the raw data. Here you can see box plots representing the individual plot level yields at each site, with mixtures shown in the blue box plots and monocultures shown in the grey box plots. Generally, you can see that the mixtures are higher than the monocultures at each site. And with our modelling approach, we showed that this difference was due to synergistic interactions, in particular between species from different groups, so from different groups across grass, legume, and herbs. Here I've added in the average of the communities with the 6 species sown equally. So remember that across our mixtures, we had a gradient from 2 species up to 6 species. And generally, the 6 species mixture was among the better mixtures at each site. Here I've also added in the average of the high-end grass monoculture plots. There it's shown with the red line. What you can see here is quite a lot of variation due to site location. And a natural question arises here as to whether or not any of this variation across sites is due to climate. And we explored this through our modelling approach. What you can see here is the predicted yield versus the average daily temperature. On the temperature axis, you can see where the individual sites lie in the temperature gradient and where the average temperature is. The grey lines show the predicted yield for each of the 6 monocultures in the experiment. And the highlighted line with the red triangles on it, that's showing the predicted yield for the high-end grass monoculture across the temperature gradient. Now I've added in the 70-30 grass legging predictions again as they change across the temperature gradient. And what I'm going to add in next is the same prediction curve for the 6 species mixture. And you might wonder where this line will lie. As expected, it lies above the high-end grass and above the 70-30 grass legume curves. But perhaps less expected is that the difference between the 6 species mixture curve and the conventional practices, that difference is actually increasing as the temperature increases. But this is a crucial result in the context of the climate crisis. Temperatures are increasing across the globe, and we have shown that 6 species multi-species mixtures have major potential to be used as a climate adaptation solution. This is excellent news for the future of productive grasslands. In summary, our study focused in on multi-species mixtures. And we have shown that multi-species mixtures are better than one grass with higher nitrogen rates applied. We've shown that multi-species mixtures are better than a 70-30 perennial ryegrass white clover combination. And we've shown that multi-species mixtures are robust to deviations in sowing proportions of grasses, legumes, and herbs compared to sowing them all equally. And we've shown that multi-species mixtures are a promising climate adaptation solution. What next for LegacyNet? Well, you can read the full story from the work I presented here in O'Malley et al. That's published in Science. We're also currently studying other agronomic outcomes such as weed invasion and forage quality. And in our experiment, we had a follow-on crop sown in each plot after the grassland part of our experiment was completed. And we are currently investigating what are the effects of manipulating species diversity in a grassland lay on the performance of a follow-on crop. You can watch this space. There's plenty more to come from LegacyNet. Thank you very much.